Can I request all the brothers to kindly come forward, please, to the first saf? Keep it in mind, there are wires here, so try not to. Brothers on the right hand side, brothers on the left hand side.
You'll be two.
Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man wala. Amma ba'd. Respected brothers, sisters, elders, young friends, I greet you with the greetings of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I can request this gap over here, brothers, if you can fill these gaps. Alhamdulillah, all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has gathered us in the houses, in one of the houses of Allah, in the masjid, after performing our Isha prayer in a congregation, and then staying behind to learn about certain aspects of this religion, certain criteria we need to meet, and inshallah, hopefully leave the masjid forgiven, and also inshallah leave the masjid enhancing our knowledge in Islam. It's very important that we do not take these gatherings as something lightly in our eyes. But these are the gatherings of the angels. These are the gatherings wherein Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala announces forgiveness for those who have took part of and sat in the gathering. Even if a person never had the intention to sit down, from hadith we learn that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says Allah Azza wa Jalla also forgives him. So these gatherings are gatherings of forgiveness, mercy. And as you know, the masjid, time upon time, tries to benefit the community. We want to benefit the people, as well as benefiting ourselves. Hence we have reached out to different scholars, different muftis, and for more than a year now, alhamdulillah, we have been organizing the end of month programs. And we also have a channel on YouTube where we have our talks uploaded and nasheeds uploaded. There's a hadith which takes place every Tuesday. Every Tuesday, 7 o'clock for the brothers, for the sisters, 6:30 until 7 o'clock, and for the brothers, 7 o'clock till 7:30. Every Tuesdays this takes place. So try your utmost best to dedicate some time in learning. Alhamdulillah, may Allah Azza wa Jalla accept you all. It's very difficult sometimes to come out, especially when it's dark, especially when it's cold, especially when we have different things going on. But by Allah, maybe this small effort of yours could be a means of entering into Jannah. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us entry into Jannah for small efforts like this. We all say Ameen. So alhamdulillah, we will continue with our program today. Few announcements that we need to remember whilst we are here, our phones should be turned off. If not, at least on silent. It is highly disrespectful if a speaker has traveled all the way to speak to you, and here you are on your phones, and you're messaging away, and you're WhatsApping away. Very, very disrespectful. So don't keep this in mind and try to keep your phones off. If you haven't, then do this now. The other announcement is, after the program, we have food prepared. So please don't leave without having some food. This will be after the program. Without further delay, firstly, as usual, we start with the recitation of the Quran. So I would request Hafiz Nahid to come up and bless us with the glorious recitation of the Quran. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ أوحيت إلى الحواريين أن آمنوا بي وبرسولي فإني أعذبه عذابا
ذلك الفوز العظيم لله ملك السماوات والأرض وما فيهن وهو على كل شيء قدير صدق الله العظيم.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah. May Allah Azza wa Jal make this Quran a means of salvation for you in this life and the life after. We all say Ameen. Next, I would like to call upon Brother Saad, who has just finished his MA, his Masters in Architecture here in one of the universities of Manchester. He's a student from India. He would like to bless us by reciting an Nasheed. Jazakallah khair wa barakallahu feekum.
نظر میں جمال حبیب خدا ہے، نظر میں جمال حبیب خدا، ان کی تصویر سینے میں موجود ہے، جس نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، وہ محمد مدینے میں موجود ہے نظر میں جمال حبیب خدا، ان کی تصویر سینے میں موجود ہے، جس نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، وہ محمد مدینے میں موجود ہے۔ پھول کھلتے ہیں پر کے صلی علی، پھول کھلتے ہیں پر کے صلی علی، جھوم کر کہہ رہی ہے یہ باد صبا، ایسی خوشبو چمن کے گلوں میں کہاں، جو نبی کے پسینے میں موجود ہے، جس نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، وہ محمد مدینے میں موجود ہے۔ چھوڑنا تیرا طیبہ گوارا نہیں، چھوڑنا تیرا طیبہ گوارا نہیں، ساری دنیا میں ایسا نظارہ نہیں، ایسا منظر زمانے نے دیکھا نہیں، جیسا منظر مدینے میں موجود ہے، جس نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، وہ محمد مدینے میں موجود ہے۔ ہم نے مانا کہ جنت بہت ہے حسین، ہم نے مانا کہ جنت بہت ہے حسین، چھوڑ کر ہم مدینہ نہ جائیں کہیں، یوں تو جنت میں سب ہے مدینہ نہیں، اور جنت مدینے میں موجود ہے، جس نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، وہ محمد مدینے میں موجود ہے۔ وہ ابو بکر فاروق كلام إلهي ضياء ومحمد مدينة من وجوده.
ما شاء الله حياك الله. Jazakallah khair. Barakallahu feekum. Allah Azza wa Jalla accept you. Jazakallah khair. Without further delay, I would like to request our honorable guest, Mufti Sufyan, to kindly come up. Just a brief introduction into Mufti Saad's life. Alhamdulillah, me and Mufti Saad, we studied together in Bolton Madrasa, and for many years we were roommates. Barakallahu feek. Mufti Saab, he completed his HAFIZ in Leicester. Then his family had moved to ROCHDALE. After they had moved to ROCHDALE, Mufti Saab enrolled in Darul Uloom Bolton, Jamia Islamiyya, where we had initially met. He completed his Alimiya course there. After completing his Alimiya course, Mufti Saab then travelled to Pakistan, to Karachi, to one of the most famous Darul Ulooms in the world, Darul Uloom Karachi, under the guidance of the Grand Mufti, Mufti Taqi Uthmani, Hafidahullah Ta'ala, where he completed his Iftah and he became a Mufti there. Since then, Mufti Saab has been very engaged in the work of Da'wah, and he is also an Imam in ROCHDALE, and we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bless him and to take continuous work from him. This is the first time he has come to our masjid. And inshallah, hopefully it's not the last time. We have nothing but love for you. May Allah Azza wa Jal bless you and accept you for all your efforts. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakallah khair.
الحمد لله حمدا أولا وحمدا آخرا وحمدا ظاهرا وباطنا وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. All praises belong to Allah the Almighty, the most compassionate, the most merciful, the being that you and I turn to on a daily basis, the being that you and I supplicate to, pray to, ask for whatever we need from, the being that grants us with food and drink and shelter and clothing on a daily basis. Peace, blessings and salutations be upon all the prophets, from Prophet Adam alayhi salam to Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, to Prophet Ayub alayhi salam, to Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, to Prophet Musa alayhi salam, to Prophet Isa alayhi salam, and not forgetting the best of prophets, the best of creation, the leader of all prophets, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, their companions, their family members, and all those that follow them with goodness until the day of judgment. After praising Allah the Almighty and sending salutations on the prophets, I would firstly like to thank the organizers, the masjid committee members, the imams of the masjid, Sheikh Ruban, and the other shuyukh that are present, for granting me the opportunity to come to your masjid and deliver a few words. May Allah the Almighty make His benefit from whatever is going to be said today. The topic of today's speech, Jesus, peace be upon him, a prophet of Islam. Jesus, as we all know in Arabic, is Isa alayhi salam. And Prophet Isa alayhi salam, his blessed mother was known as Maryam alayhi salam, and in English we say Mary, peace be upon her. These two figures are significant in Islam as well. Allah the Almighty, He mentions Prophet Isa alayhi salam and his blessed mother Maryam alayhi salam by name in the Quran. Prophet Isa alayhi salam, it is our belief that he has been raised to the heavens. He will come back before the day of judgment. He will defeat Dajjal, and he will restore peace and justice on the earth. Allah the Almighty has mentioned Prophet Isa alayhi salam more than 20 times in the Quran. Such is his significance. Allah the Almighty has mentioned Maryam alayhi salam, the blessed mother of Isa alayhi salam, a number of times in the Quran, to such an extent that she has been mentioned more than what she has been mentioned in the New Testament. In fact, a whole chapter has been named after Maryam alayhi salam, Surah Maryam, the chapter of Maryam, chapter 19 of the Quran. These two significant figures are so significant in Islam that we cannot overlook them, because Allah the Almighty has blessed them by mentioning them in the Quran a number of times. Now when we look into their lives, we learn many lessons. Allah the Almighty has chosen them to be mentioned because they were chosen servants of Allah the Almighty. Part and parcel of being a Muslim, we have to believe in every single prophet. We have to believe in every single messenger of Allah. Peace and blessings be upon them all. If we do not believe in any prophet, whether that is just one prophet, whether that is all the prophets, then we will no longer be believers. Specifically talking about Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, if we do not believe him to be prophet, then we will not be a believer. We have to believe him to be a prophet of Allah. Allah the Almighty has made him from amongst the greatest of prophets. Just like individuals have ranks in this world, just like the companions, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in have ranks, likewise the prophets of Allah, they also have ranks. And Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, he is from amongst the greatest of prophets. Allah the Almighty, he has mentioned him from amongst 5 great prophets in the Quran. Now when we look into the case of Prophet Isa alayhi salam, then we need no introduction in terms of explaining who he is and who he was, in terms of referring to history books, in terms of referring to books written by others. We only need to look in the Quran. Allah the Almighty has given a detailed account of how he came into existence and what happened during his time when he was born, etc. And we will go directly into the verses of Allah the Almighty. Allah the Almighty, he mentions in the Quran, chapter 3, verse 42, وَإِذْ قَالَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةُ يَا مَرْيَمُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَاكِ وَطَهَّرَكِ وَاصْطَفَاكِ عَلَى نِسَاءِ الْعَالَمِينَ. And when the angel said, O Mary, O Maryam, alayhi salam, indeed Allah has chosen you and purified you and chosen you above the women of the world. So Allah the Almighty is praising Maryam alayhi salam that Allah the Almighty has chosen you. Then further on in the next verse, Allah the Almighty mentions, O Mary, submit in obedience to your Lord, prostrate and bow down with those that bow down. And then Allah mentions in verse 45, in the same surah, in the same chapter, إِذْ قَالَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةُ يَا مَرْيَمُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُبَشِّرُكِ بِكَلِمَةٍ مِّنْهُ اسْمُهُ الْمَسِيحُ عِيسَى ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ وَجِيهًا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ وَمِنَ الْمُقَرَّبِينَ. And when the angels said to Mary, O Mary, indeed Allah is giving you the glad tidings of a word from him. His name is Jesus, the son of Mary, Isa ibn Maryam. He will be revered and respected in this world and in the hereafter. And he will be from amongst the close servants of Allah. Allah the Almighty is saying here that the angels, they came to Maryam alayhi salam and they gave her the glad tidings of a servant that Allah the Almighty will bless her with. And that servant and that blessed individual is Prophet Jesus, Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Allah the Almighty, He says that He is a kalima from Him. He is a word from Him. What Allah the Almighty is referring to here, when Allah wants to create something, when He wants to make something come into existence, all He says or all He needs to say is kun, which is an Arabic word which means be, and that thing becomes, and that thing comes into existence, and that thing occurs. So this is how Isa alayhi salam came into existence. Now when the angels told Maryam that Allah the Almighty will bless you with a son, then she became a bit unsettled. And she started saying, and Allah mentions these words further on in the verses. She says, قالت رب أنى يكون لي ولد ولم يمسسني بشر. That, oh my Lord, how can I have a child when no man has ever touched me? When I have no husband, when I have no male companion, so how can I bear a child? So Allah the Almighty, He mentions in the next verses that when Allah the Almighty wants to create something, then this is how He creates something. If He wants to create something, He will create it in whatever way He wants. إِذَا قَضَى أَمْرًا فَإِنَّمَا يَقُولُ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونُ. When Allah the Almighty decrees a matter, then He just has to say kun, and He just says be, and it becomes, and it comes into existence. And then Allah further mentions that He will teach Isa alayhi salam the scripture, the book. He will teach him wisdom. He will teach him the Torah, the Injil. And he will be a prophet sent to the Banu Israel. Banu Israel are the children of Israel, the children of Israel. They were the descendants of a prophet known as Prophet Yakub alayhi salam. The progeny of Prophet Yakub alayhi salam was known as Banu Israel, and his other name was also Israel. So Jesus, Prophet Isa alayhi salam, was sent to Banu Israel, and this is what Allah is mentioning. And when Jesus will come, He will say to His people, and this is what He said, Allah is narrating, that I have come to you, أَنِّي قَدْ جِئْتُكُمْ بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ أَنِّي أَخْلُقُ لَكُم مِّنَ الطِّينِ كَهَيْئَةِ الطَّيْرِ فَأَنفُخُ فِيهِ فَيَكُونُ طَيْرًا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. I have come to you as a sign, and from the signs, so when Prophet Jesus, Prophet Isa alayhi salam came to his people, he is giving the message, he's delivering the message. He says that I have come to you as a sign, and from amongst the signs, Allah the Almighty has blessed me with some miracles. And one of the miracles Allah mentions in the Quran is, and Prophet Isa is telling the people that if a bird-like figure is in front of me, or if there is a bird-like sculpture, I blow in this sculpture, this bird-like figure, and this bird comes alive. So this is one of his miracles. And then he further mentions other miracles by saying, وَأُبْرِئُ الْأَكْمَهَ وَالْأَبْرَصَ وَأُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. That He can cure those that are blind. He can restore the eyesight of those that are born blind. And He can also cure the lepers. Those that have skin diseases, etc., He can cure them. And these were from amongst His miracles. And then Allah further mentions that وَأُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا تَأْكُلُونَ وَمَا تَدَّخِرُونَ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ. Another one of His miracles is that He was able to inform the people of what they used to eat and what they used to store in their houses. Because Allah the Almighty gave Him this permission. And also, another miracle was وَأُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. So Jesus tells the people that I can bring the dead back to life. But an important thing that He mentions is bi'idhnillah, through the permission of Allah. So all these miracles that I can carry out, they are not because of my power, they are not because of me having some might, rather it is due to Allah the Almighty. Allah the Almighty has granted me the ability. So this is His humility. He is showing His humbleness, and He is teaching us a lesson of humility, that if you are blessed with a certain quality in life, Allah the Almighty has blessed you with a beautiful voice, you can recite the Quran. Allah the Almighty has given you a certain skill where you can talk in front of people. Allah the Almighty has given you the ability to gain certain skills where you can work in life, where you are an engineer, where you are good at maths, where you are good at sports, then always give attribution to Allah the Almighty, that Allah the Almighty is the one that has blessed you with the ability, with the power. Allah the Almighty is the one who has given you the ultimate power and ability to do that and carry out that thing. So always refer to Allah in everything that you do. And this is the main message Isa a.s. gives us, and Allah is narrating in the Quran that everything is to the permission of Allah the Almighty. And then Prophet Isa a.s. further mentions that the messages that I have come with, it is to confirm that which was before me, and that was the book, the Torah. The Torah was the book before me, and I have come to confirm this message, and I have come to acknowledge this message and reiterate the same messages and the same lessons. So please take from me and worship Allah the Almighty. So this is what Allah the Almighty mentions, and He wonderfully demonstrates the case of Mary and her son Isa a.s. And then if we look into the chapter of Maryam, a chapter Allah the Almighty has dedicated towards Maryam a.s. and this is the only chapter in the Quran that has been dedicated to a female figure. And Allah the Almighty has mentioned, like we mentioned at the start, Maryam a.s. the only female figure in the Quran by name. So this tells us how significant she is and her status. So if we look into the chapter of Maryam, chapter 19 of the Quran, verse 16, Allah mentions, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ مَرْيَمْ, and mention in the book the story of Maryam, the story of Mary. Allah mentions in detail her story, where she went into seclusion from her family, and she went to a place, a distant place in the east. And then Allah further mentions that He sent a messenger. He sent the angel Jibreel as a messenger to Maryam. When he came in the form of a human to Maryam, then Maryam a.s. she became unsettled, and she was like, who is this that has come? And angel Jibreel said to Maryam that, do not worry, I am a messenger from Allah, and I have been sent to give you the glad tidings. I have come to give you the glad tidings of a slave of Allah. Allah the Almighty will bless you with a pure servant, and that is Isa a.s. And then Maryam, she mentioned the same things, that how can I be blessed with a child when I have not touched a male, I have no husband, I do not have a male companion, so how will I be blessed with a child? And then the same things are reiterated that we mentioned, that Allah the Almighty, He blessed her by just saying kun, and Allah the Almighty, He made her pregnant, and she bore a child, and she gave birth to Isa a.s. When she gave birth to Isa a.s., and I'm fast forwarding the verses, she gave birth to Isa a.s., she went to her people, then the people looked at her with a child, and they are saying to her, what is this? And they are hurling abuse against her, they are giving her false accusations that how can you bear a child, and what is this? And in short, they were basically trying to say that you have committed fornication, you have committed unlawful relations, etc. How can you give birth to a child? So then Maryam a.s., obviously she was going through a test by Allah the Almighty. She was going through a test, and all she did was she gestured towards Isa a.s. And Allah the Almighty mentions, فَأَشَارَتْ إِلَيْهِ قَالُوا كَيْفَ نُكَلِّمُ مَنْ كَانَ فِي الْمَهْدِ صَبِيًّا. She gestured to Isa a.s., who was a child, who was a baby in a cradle. And a baby in a cradle cannot talk. A baby who is of that age, he or she cannot talk, because he or she, a child of that age, is too young. So a baby of that age cannot talk. So she gestured to Isa a.s., saying that he will talk and he will tell you and he will explain to you. So Isa a.s., he talks, and this was another miracle of his, where he talks in childhood whilst he's a baby. He talks and he says, and the people actually say that how can he talk? How can he talk when he is of such an age? But then Isa a.s. ends up talking. Allah the Almighty gives him the power to talk, and he says, قال إني عبد الله آتاني الكتاب وجعلني نبيا وجعلني مباركا أينما كنت وأوصاني بالصلاة والزكاة ما دمت حيا وبرا بوالدتي. So he says, I am the servant of Allah. Allah the Almighty has given me the book and He has made me the prophet. He has made me blessed wherever I go. He has enjoined upon me salah, zakat, until I am alive, until I live, and that I be dutiful and obedient to my mother. So these are the things that he mentions. And like we mentioned in the verses of Al Imran in chapter 3, we mentioned that Allah mentions وَيُكَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِي الْمَهْدِ وَكَلَّهُمْ وَمِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, that Allah the Almighty will grant Isa alayhi salam the ability to talk in his cradle when he is of that age, and also when he reaches maturity, when he is of manhood. And this is Allah the Almighty saying that this is His miracle to him, and his miracle was actually brought to light, and this is the miracle that Allah the Almighty also mentions in the Quran. And if we look into the ahadith, the blessed prophetic narrations of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions, and this narration was narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, and Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he actually records this in his Sahih, that there were only 3 babies who spoke whilst they were in their cradle and whilst they were in that age of being of a cradle age and of a baby of such a young age. There were only 3 occasions in humanity, in life, in this world, when 3 babies spoke when they were of that age. One of those occasions were Prophet Isa alayhi salam, when he spoke when he was of that age in his cradle, where he testified that he is the servant of Allah, etc. And Allah the Almighty has made him the prophet and given him the book, like we mentioned. A second occasion was actually in the time of Banu Israel again, where there was an individual known as Jurayj, and he was actually a pious individual. Jurayj, he was in prayer, he was praying, just like we pray salah, and whilst he was praying, his mother was calling him. His mother is calling him, but Jurayj is in prayer. Jurayj doesn't know whether he should break his prayer and answer his mother or whether he should carry on. Jurayj, he carries on praying. His mother is still calling him, but obviously she receives no response. So then the mother, she stays out of anger, may Jurayj not pass away until he sees the face of prostitutes. This is what the mother said out of anger. And we know when a mother gets angry, she says all sorts of things. She says all types of things. So it's very important that a mother, she safeguards her tongue and she is careful in what she says, because a mother's prayer is very special. When a mother utters words, when she utters a prayer, specifically in relation to her children, then this is a time of acceptance, and Allah the Almighty accepts her words and her prayers, whether those prayers are good or bad. And sadly, Jurayj's mother, she uttered these words saying, and they were words of a bad prayer, saying that may Jurayj not pass away until he sees the face of prostitutes. So what happened was Jurayj finished his prayer, he carries on doing whatever he does, and obviously he probably met his mother, etc. But the hadith mentions that he is in his hermitage. A hermitage is like a place of prayer and a place of worship. So he's praying in his hermitage, and then a prostitute enters his hermitage and she tries to seduce him. Jurayj, because he was pious, he does not fall for her tricks and he blanks her. The prostitute, she leaves the hermitage and she goes to a shepherd and she seduces a shepherd. The shepherd, he falls in her traps, and this prostitute, she becomes pregnant. Then the prostitute, after some time, she gives birth, and then she spreads this false rumor that this child I have given birth to is Jurayj's child. So Jurayj, he committed unlawful relations with me, and as a result, I have this child. Now the people of that location, of that area, they became enemies of Jurayj and they became against Jurayj. That how can Jurayj, such a pious individual, carry out such an unlawful act of fornication. So obviously everyone turned against Jurayj. Everyone turned against Jurayj and they started hurling abuse against him. They started swearing, they started abusing him to such an extent that they destroyed his hermitage. They destroyed his hermitage, and Jurayj was obviously in a state of distress. Now what does an individual do when he's in a state of distress? What does an individual do? What does a Muslim do? What does the Prophet Muhammad teach us? And what did the Prophet Muhammad himself do? When he was in a state of sadness, then he would resort to salah. He would engage his family members, his companions, and he would advise them that when you are in an unsettled situation, when you go through a testing time, then turn to salah. Connect with Allah the Almighty. And this is what Jurayj does. Obviously, Jurayj wasn't told this by the Prophet Muhammad because the Prophet Muhammad came after Jurayj and Jurayj's time, because this was in the time of Banu Israel. So Jurayj, what he does, because he was pious, he performs ablution and then he starts praying. After praying, he goes up to that baby, the child that is born from that prostitute, and the people are around as well. And Jurayj, he says to the child, "Who is your father?" He asks the child, "Who is your father?" And the child, he speaks, and the child is of an age when a baby is in his or her cradle, when a baby cannot even speak. But Jurayj, he asks the child, "Who is your father?" And the child says that such and such shepherd is my father. Meaning, the child is giving protection to Jurayj and declaring to the people that Jurayj is not my father. Jurayj never committed unlawful relations with this prostitute. Rather, it was such and such shepherd who is my father, not Jurayj. So Jurayj is free from sin. He never committed sin. Then the people obviously apologized to Jurayj, and the people said to Jurayj that we are sorry for destroying your hermitage. If you want, we will build your hermitage again from gold, not from soil and from other material that was existent in that time, but we will build your hermitage from gold. Jurayj says it is fine. He says, build my hermitage again, but just build it from soil like was prevalent in that time. And Jurayj became free from sin. So this was another time when a baby spoke, when it's of an age of being in its cradle. And then a third time when a baby spoke, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, when a baby is in its time of being in its cradle, when a baby can't even speak, was in the time of Banu Israel again. There was a female, she was breastfeeding her child. She is breastfeeding her child, and a handsome passes by, and the mother looks at this handsome individual that's passing by and says, "Oh Allah, can you make my child like this handsome individual that is passing by?" Then this baby, who is being breastfed, who cannot even speak, the baby looks at this individual, this person that is passing by. And then the baby starts speaking, when the baby cannot even speak at that age, but the baby starts speaking because Allah gives this baby the power. "Oh Allah, do not make me like this handsome individual that is passing by." Then after certain time, the mother sees that a female is passing by, and this female is actually a slave. Then the mother makes a prayer, makes dua, "Oh Allah, please do not make my child like this female individual that is passing by." Then the baby starts looking at this female individual, and the baby starts making a prayer, "Oh Allah, please make me like this female that is passing by." Then the mother becomes shocked that I'm making prayer, and whatever prayer I'm making, my baby is speaking when the baby cannot even speak at such an age, and the baby is making the opposite prayer. What is going on here? So the mother starts asking the child that, "Why are you making such a prayer?" "I'm making prayer that Allah make you like this handsome individual that was passing by, and I'm making prayer that, oh Allah, do not make you like this female slave that was passing by, and you're making the opposite prayer." So then the baby starts speaking. Allah gives the baby power, and the baby starts speaking, saying that, "You know, this handsome individual that's passed by, and you are saying, oh Allah, make me like him, he is actually a tyrant. He is an oppressor. So I do not want to be like him. And this female slave, she is actually being accused of theft, etc. But she reality is a pious individual and I want to be like her. So this is the third occasion when a baby spoke, when it is of an age where a baby cannot speak. So this is the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ just telling us and demonstrating to us. Now going back to the chapter of Mary and the verses where Allah the Almighty mentions about Prophet Mary going through a hard time and she was hurled with abuse and she was accused, and Allah the Almighty granted Isa alayhi salam this miracle of speaking when a baby cannot even speak, and Isa alayhi salam was of that age and he spoke, freeing his mother from being accused of the sin and being accused of these abuses and the swear words, etc. Allah the Almighty, He declared their cleanliness, their purity, and Allah the Almighty, He declared that these are significant individuals in essence. And if we look at Prophet Isa alayhi salam, another significant thing that he declared in his time to his people, he says that after me there will be a man that will come, and this man will be Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah the Almighty, He mentions in the Quran, in Surah As-Saf, the chapter of Saf, He mentions,
وَإِذْ قَالَ عِيسَى بْنُ مَرْيَمَ يَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ إِنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِلَيْكُمْ. And then further Allah, He mentions that وَمُبَشِّرًا بِرَسُولٍ يَأْتِي مِن بَعْدِ اسْمُهُ أَحْمَدَ, that I give you the glad tidings of a messenger, of a prophet that will come after me. And this prophet is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Allah the Almighty actually uses the word Ahmad, which means the most praised one. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, obviously, is the most praised one. He's the best of creation. He's the closest to Allah. He comes second in being beloved to us after Allah the Almighty. So he is the most praised one. So Isa alayhi salam, he actually declared, he foretold his people that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will come after me. There will be a messenger, and he's trying to tell them that if you are alive, and those individuals that are alive and they reach this message reaches them, they need to understand that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is a true messenger. He is a true messenger from Allah the Almighty, so you need to believe in him. Now what happened in Prophet Isa alayhi salam's time, when he declared prophethood, he declared that he's a prophet from Allah, then as was natural in even other prophets' time, many individuals turned against them. Many individuals turned against them and became their enemies, and they never agreed to their message, they never agreed to their book, they never agreed to their teachings. So the same happened to Prophet Isa alayhi salam. There were many individuals, there were many groups. There were one group of people, and they were the individuals more so that used to follow the Jewish faith. Because before Prophet Isa alayhi salam came, there were adherents of the Jewish faith. Prophet Isa alayhi salam came to individuals, and his religion became famously known as the religion of Christianity. So his individuals were Christians, and this is what they were famously known as, and this is how we know them as well, Christians. Before Christianity, there was Judaism. Before Prophet Isa alayhi salam came, there was Judaism, and there were the adherents known as the Jews, and those that followed the Jewish faith. So they were also prevalent in Prophet Isa alayhi salam's time, when the Prophet Isa alayhi salam came with his message. Now, many of these adherents of the Jewish faith, they turned against Isa alayhi salam. They turned against him to such an extent that they plotted to kill him. They wanted to kill him. And then we had other individuals that were on another extreme that praised Prophet Isa alayhi salam. They praised him so much so that they gave him the rank and the status of God. They gave him the status of God, and they started saying things like he's the son of God, etc. So there were two extremes. One extreme of individuals wanting to kill him, another extreme of individuals that were praising him and exaggerating in his praise. And this is why the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us in an authentic narration, he tells us, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells us that لا تطروني كما أطر النصارى عيسى بن مريم, that do not exaggerate in my praise just like the individuals of and the adherents and certain adherents of Prophet Isa alayhi salam, Isa ibn Maryam, the son of Mary, they exaggerated in his praise, where they gave him the rank and the status of God and the Son of God, etc. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells us that do not praise me to that extent, do not exaggerate in my praise to that extent, where you start giving me the rank of God and you start saying that I am God and I am the Son of God, etc. Do not praise me to that extent. I am the servant of Allah the Almighty, and make sure you understand this, that I am the servant of Allah the Almighty, I am not the Son of God, I am not the God. And obviously we do acknowledge and understand that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he is the best of messengers, he's the best of prophets, he comes second after Allah the Almighty, he's the most beloved to us, and this is part and parcel of our iman. We cannot be a true believer until Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, after Allah the Almighty, is more beloved to us than ourselves, our children, our family members, our wealth, and everything that we possess and earn and that we have. So we have to understand this as well, and that is why we send excessive salutations upon the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and we show our extreme love for him by action in our heart, etc. as well, and by following his footsteps. Now going back to the incident of Isa alayhi salam, where he had two extremes of individuals and groups, and there were other groups as well that were present in the time. So when certain individuals plotted to kill him, they first spread rumors against Prophet Isa alayhi salam, that Prophet Isa alayhi salam is such and such, he's our enemy, and there were Romans present in the time of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. So they told the Romans that Prophet Isa alayhi salam is such and such, he's against us, to such an extent that the governor of Rome, he was told that Prophet Isa alayhi salam, from amongst his message that he's delivering, one message is that he wants to dethrone you, he wants to gain power, he wants to throw you off your throne, and he wants basically the power of the time. So the governor of the Romans, he became outraged, he became angry. Now what is this? So he ordered for Prophet Isa alayhi salam to be captured, to be imprisoned, and he ordered for him to be killed and to be murdered and to be crucified as well. Now what Allah the Almighty did, he wanted to save Isa alayhi salam, because obviously he's the prophet of Allah, he's the chosen servant of Allah the Almighty, so he wanted to save him. So Allah the Almighty, when they were after him, when the individuals, his enemies were after him, when they were trying to capture him, to crucify him, to kill him, then Allah the Almighty, he chose an individual who was a hypocrite of Isa alayhi salam. He was actually against Isa alayhi salam. He actually resembled Isa alayhi salam in looks. So the enemies that were after Isa alayhi salam, by accident or by coincidence, by happening of Allah the Almighty, they captured this individual, this hypocrite, who resembled in features of Isa alayhi salam. They captured him thinking him to be Isa alayhi salam. And when they captured him, they thought, yes, we've got Isa alayhi salam, and now we can kill him, we can crucify him. So they captured him, this individual that looks like Isa alayhi salam, and then they crucified him, they put him on the cross, etc., and they killed him and they murdered him. Allah the Almighty, he tells us in the Quran categorically that Isa alayhi salam was not killed. Isa alayhi salam, he was not crucified. Allah the Almighty, he mentions in chapter 4, verse 157 in Surah An-Nisa, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ, that they did not kill Isa alayhi salam. They did not crucify him, they did not put him on the cross. Rather, the people that tried to capture him, they were made to think of a certain individual that resembled Isa alayhi salam, and they thought that he was Isa alayhi salam, and they captured him and they crucified him and they killed him. But they never killed Isa alayhi salam. وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ يَقِينًا, Allah mentions that they did not kill him for sure. In reality, they did not kill him. Rather, Allah mentions بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ, rather Allah the Almighty, he raised Isa alayhi salam towards him. And that is why part and parcel of our belief is that Isa alayhi salam is in the heavens. Isa alayhi salam is in the heavens. And that is why Allah the Almighty, he mentions from the verses of Surah Al-Imran that we mentioned in chapter 3, Allah mentions, إِذْ قَالَ اللَّهُ يَا عِيسَىٰ إِنِّي مُتَوَفِّيكَ وَرَافِعُكَ إِلَيَّ وَمُطَهِّرُكَ. That, remember when Allah said to Isa alayhi salam "O Isa, I will take you. I will take you and I will raise you towards me and I will purify you." So Allah the Almighty, here He's mentioning that I will raise you towards me in the heavens. So Isa alayhi salam was not killed. Isa alayhi salam was not crucified. He was not murdered. So this is not part of our belief. Our belief is that Isa alayhi salam was raised to the heavens. Likewise, another belief of the Christians is the belief of Trinity, where they have this belief of Isa alayhi salam being the Son of God, and then they also give him the rank of God, and then they say that there is something known as the Holy Spirit, etc., etc. Allah the Almighty, He denounces this belief in the Quran and He debunks this, and He says that Allah the Almighty is not the third of the three. Allah the Almighty is not the third of the three. Allah the Almighty, He mentions, لَقَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ ثَالِثُ ثَلَاثَةٍ. Indeed, those individuals that have believed that Allah the Almighty is the third of the three, these individuals have disbelieved. Whoever says that He is the third of the three, they have disbelieved. So whoever believes in Trinity, etc., and all the beliefs around this, they have disbelieved. Allah the Almighty is one. Allah the Almighty is one. He has no son, He has no parents, He has no child. Allah the Almighty is unique. Allah the Almighty is one. He is not in need of a child. He is not in need of a son. Allah the Almighty, like He mentions in Surah Al-Ikhlas, Allah the Almighty is independent. Everyone and everything is in need of Him, and He is not in need of anyone or anything. Allah the Almighty is not in need of anyone or anything, but everyone and everything is in need and dependent on Him. So this is our belief. Now, when we look at Prophet Isa alayhi salam, Allah the Almighty, He mentions in the Quran one thing, that he was like Prophet Adam alayhi salam. And if we look into history from Prophet Adam alayhi salam all the way until now, there are 4 ways in which an individual comes into existence. An individual, and this is the most common way, and as we all know, and this is how an individual comes into existence in this day and age, an individual comes into existence through a mother and father, where a mother and father, a male and female, they get married, and then obviously they procreate, and the child comes into existence. Another way a child comes into existence is only through the mother, and this was in the case of Isa alayhi salam, where Allah the Almighty just said kun, and his mother Mary, she became pregnant and she gave birth to Isa alayhi salam. So this is the case where Isa alayhi salam, he came into existence just through a mother, just through a female. So this is 2 ways. A third way is the way Allah the Almighty mentions in the Quran. This is with Adam alayhi salam. He came into existence without a mother and without a father. Allah the Almighty, He actually mentions in the Quran, in Surah Al-Imran, إِنَّ مَثَلَ عِيسَى عِنْدَ اللَّهِ كَمَثَلِ آدَمَ خَلَقَهُ مِنْ تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونَ. That indeed the example of Isa alayhi salam in the eyes of Allah is like the example of Adam. Allah the Almighty created Adam from soil, from clay. Allah the Almighty just said, be, and Adam alayhi salam came into existence, and he came into existence. So Adam alayhi salam was created from soil and from clay. Allah the Almighty just said, be, and he came alive and he came into existence. So he came into existence without a mother and without a father. So Allah is saying, likewise, Isa alayhi salam came into existence through kun, through the word kun. Allah just said be, and Isa alayhi salam came into existence. Allah the Almighty just said kun, and Isa alayhi salam's mother, Mary, she became pregnant and she gave birth to Isa alayhi salam. The 4th way an individual comes into existence, and obviously this only occurred once, was through a male, just a male without a female. And that is the example of Hawa alayhi salam, the wife, the blessed wife of Prophet Adam alayhi salam, where we believe Hawa alayhi salam, Eve, she came into existence through Adam. She came into existence through Adam. Allah the Almighty created Eve through Adam, and like narrations suggest, she came into existence through the rib of Adam alayhi salam. So this is 4 ways an individual comes into existence, and obviously 3 of the ways only occurred once. So Isa alayhi salam came into existence just through a female figure, through his mother. Adam alayhi salam came into existence without a mother and without a father, without a male and without a female. And the 3rd occurrence was that of Eve. She came into existence just through a male figure, and these 3 occurrences just occurred 3 times, and they have never occurred again in history. And obviously the 4th way, and obviously this is the most common, and this is what we know, that an individual comes into existence through a male and female, through a mother and father. So these are just certain things that we understand and we learn. Now I want to move on to lessons that we learn from the story of Isa alayhi salam. We learn many lessons from the story of both Isa alayhi salam and his mother Maryam alayhi salam. One lesson is the lesson of fortitude and being patient and forbearing. Maryam alayhi salam, when she gave birth to Isa alayhi salam and she went in front of people, the people thought that she committed an unlawful act, and they started hurling abuse against her. They started accusing her of all sorts. But Maryam alayhi salam, she stayed strong. She was patient. She had a trust in Allah the Almighty. She built her trust in Allah the Almighty. And this is what we need to do in life. In life we will go through tests. We will go through trials and tribulations. We will go through all types of tests. We may lose our job. We may lose our wealth. We may lose family members. We may lose our possessions. We may lose our belongings. Our family members, our close people may turn against us. They may accuse us of certain things that are not true. But we need to follow the footsteps of Maryam alayhi salam, and we need to stay strong, we need to stay patient, and we need to build our trust in Allah the Almighty. Allah the Almighty, He will help us. But another thing that we need to do is we need to turn to Allah in everything that we do. We need to resort to Allah no matter what we go through in life, no matter what test we go through, no matter what trial and tribulation we go through. We always turn to Allah the Almighty. Just like we learnt in the case of Jurayj, where Jurayj, he was accused of committing fornication and committing unlawful acts, etc. But what did Jurayj do? He performed ablution and he started praying and he connected with Allah the Almighty. Likewise, we need to connect with Allah the Almighty in everything that we do. We look at the case of Isa alayhi salam, when he declared prophethood. Many individuals turned against him. They wanted to kill him. They wanted to crucify him. They wanted to murder him. But Isa alayhi salam, he stayed strong. He connected with Allah the Almighty. He connected on a complete level. And sadly, in many cases, what we do is we live life as pleases us. We live life as pleases us. We do what we want in life. And when something hits us hard, sadly when something hits us hard, when we go through a trial and tribulation, that's when we start turning to Allah the Almighty. This doesn't mean we don't turn to Allah the Almighty altogether. We turn to Allah the Almighty in all cases, but we turn to Allah the Almighty in states of being good as well. When we are in a state of prosperity, when Allah the Almighty has blessed us with wealth, with health, Allah the Almighty has blessed us with everything in life, then we still need to connect with Him. We need to show gratitude to Him. We need to show our thankfulness to Him, because Allah the Almighty, He likes when we connect with Him. And if we connect with Allah at times of ease, then at times of difficulty, Allah the Almighty, when we connect with Him, then He will truly grant our wishes. He will grant our hopes. He will accept our prayers. And Allah the Almighty will truly understand that this servant of mine, he doesn't just turn to me when he is in a bad state, when he is going through a test. Rather, he turns to me even at times of ease. And Allah the Almighty loves such individuals. So this is another lesson that we learn from the story of Isa alayhi salam. Now another lesson that we learn, and Isa alayhi salam actually taught us this lesson, and Allah tells us in the Quran, when Isa alayhi salam, he spoke when he was of such a tender age, of an age when a child is in his or her cradle, when a child cannot speak. What did he say? Isa alayhi salam, like we mentioned at the start, he said to the people, and this is to clear his mother of blame when the people accused Maryam of all sorts. Then Maryam alayhi salam, she just gestured towards Isa alayhi salam, who was a baby in his cradle when he could not even speak. And what did Isa alayhi salam say? He said, قال إني عبد الله آتاني الكتاب وجعلني نبيا وجعلني مباركا أينما كنت وأوصاني بالصلاة والزكاة ما دمت حيا. Isa alayhi salam said to the people that I am a servant of Allah. I have been given the book, so he's trying to say he is a messenger, he is a prophet. But further on he says something that is very profound, something that we need to pay heed to and understand the importance of. He says that I have been enjoined to pray. I have been enjoined to pray salah. I have been enjoined to give zakat. I have been enjoined to pray, to give zakat. Out of all the things that Isa alayhi salam could have mentioned, out of all the other forms of worship, there are so many other forms of worship. If we want to worship Allah, we can worship Allah through dhikr, just by uttering Allah's name. We can worship Allah by giving sadaqah, by giving voluntary charity. But the things that Isa alayhi salam mentioned, that Allah the Almighty has enjoined upon me salah. Allah the Almighty has enjoined upon me zakat. So these are the acts of worship that Isa alayhi salam highlighted, and obviously Allah highlights in the Quran. And this is a lesson to us. This is a lesson to us that we need to pay heed to salah. Salah, our 5-time daily salah, this is an act of worship that we carry out on a daily basis. From amongst the 12 acts of worship, this is the most carried out act of worship. So we need to be punctual with our salah. We need to be punctual with our salah. Likewise with zakat as well, that we give annually, which is compulsory once every year upon that individual that fulfills the criteria that makes zakat compulsory. But this is something that many individuals overlook, zakat. Zakat is something that we need to understand that it is a right of the poor. It is only 2.5% of our wealth that we're giving away. But that 2.5% is 100% for the poor and needy. It is 100% for those individuals that need it. So we need to understand the importance. And another thing that Isa alayhi salam mentioned, whilst he is of such a tender age, he mentioned another thing. So further on Allah mentions, وَأَوْصَانِي بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ مَا دُمْتُ حَيًّا وَبَرًّا بِوَالِدَتِي. He mentions, and that Allah has enjoined upon me that I be dutiful to my parent, my mother. I be obedient and dutiful to my mother. So out of all the things that he could have mentioned, out of all the things that we can be dutiful in regards to, in relation to, we can be respectful and dutiful to our elders, we can be respectful and dutiful to our youngsters. But he mentions and highlights that Allah has enjoined upon me that I be dutiful and obedient to my mother, highlighting the importance of being respectful to our parents generally, but specifically to our mothers, and that our mothers, they hold a high status. Our mothers, they hold a high status, and Allah the Almighty has mentioned a number of verses in the Quran highlighting the significance of parents, the significance that the parents should hold in our lives, that we need to respect them, we need to be obedient to them, we need to be dutiful to them to such an extent that even if they are disbelievers, even if they are non-Muslims, we still be respectful to them, we still be obedient to them, and we never even say uff to them, we do not even say a word of contempt to them, we do not say a word that makes them angry, we do not swear at them, we do not hurl abuse at them. Sadly, nowadays, many youngsters, they do not understand the importance of being respectful and dutiful to parents. Allah the Almighty, He highlights the importance and He demonstrates being dutiful and respectful to them in such a wonderful manner. If we look into the chapter of Banu Israel in the Quran, then we see how wonderfully Allah the Almighty, He highlights the importance of being dutiful and respectful to our parents. So these are some lessons that we learn from the story of both Maryam and both Isa alayhi salam. May Allah the Almighty give us the ability to understand the significance, the importance of these two individuals, and that these two individuals, they hold a high status in Islam as well. I pray Allah the Almighty give us the ability to understand that Prophet Jesus is actually also a messenger of Islam, a prophet of Islam as well. I pray Allah the Almighty give us the ability to take heed from the lessons that we learn from the lives of these blessed individuals. I pray Allah the Almighty give us the ability to act upon everything that has been said. Ameen wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Very inspiring reminders by a wonderful guest, Mufti Sufyan hafidahullah ta'ala. Just a few announcements before we prepare for food. So please don't leave without having something to eat before beautiful biryani has been prepared in the masjid today. Inshallah, we have a very, very important program coming close to us on the 15th of December. 15th of December, which falls on a Sunday. We have the HAFIZ al-Quran completion, where 3 of our students, inshallah, will be finishing the memorization of the Quran in one go. As we know, it's been nearly 10 years now that we have started the memorization, tahfidh al-Quran in the masjid. So alhamdulillah, we have 3 of them finishing together. The program will start after Maghrib. The posters will be out this week. And the program will go on all the way till Isha Salat, followed by food. We have various scholars coming. We have the chief guest, Shaykh al-Hadith, Abdul Rahim al-Bada Sahib, Hafidahullah Ta'ala, coming as the chief honorable guest. We also have our honorable Sheikh Hamad al-Rahman Fahim, who is from our locality, graduate of Jamiatul Azhar, Egypt. He will also be delivering a talk. We have Qari Nur Muhammad Sadiq coming. We have Qari Saad from Batli also joining us to deliver some qira'at. We have HAFIZ Mizan coming from Oldham. And we have other scholars also involved, so please keep this in mind. 15th of December. On the 22nd of December, we have our honorable guest also coming to our masjid for a talk, Sheikh Abdul Majid, all the way from Crawley. He will also be coming to the masjid. And all these programs are to inspire us and to change our lifestyle and also bring us closer to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, Jazakallah khair Mufti Sufyan for coming today, and I'm sure there are many lessons we can learn. And ultimately, the greatest lesson that we can learn today is that it is a fundamental part of our belief that we believe in the prophets of Allah, and by Allah, Isa, the Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, is one of the prophets of Islam. He is no son of God, he is no God, he is no Holy Spirit. This is our fundamental belief. It is very important that we instill this and engrave this in our life and in our hearts. And also it is upon us to study about the prophets. It's very important that we study about the prophets, so we take heed from what we learn, and we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to accept this. And I lastly request Mufti Sahib to make a dua. Jazakallah khair, barakallahu feekum.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidil mursalin. Allahumma inna nas'aluka al-'afwa wal-'afiyata wal-'afiyata ad-da'imata fid dunya wal-akhirah. اللهم ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الفتن ما ظهر منها وما بطن. اللهم اصلح لنا شأننا كله. اللهم اكفنا بحلالك عن حرامك واغننا بفضلك عمن سواك. اللهم وفقنا لما تحب وترضى. Ya Allah, please accept this gathering of ours where we sat down, Ya Allah, remembering you and your prophets. Ya Allah, please accept this gathering of ours. Ya Allah, we ask you to forgive all of our sins, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we acknowledge that we are sinful. Ya Allah, we are regretful and remorseful of our sins. Ya Allah, we promise to the best of our ability. Ya Allah, in the future we will not commit sins. Ya Allah, we have left all sins. Ya Allah, we ask you from the depths of our heart, Ya Allah, we ask you for sincere repentance. Ya Allah, please forgive all of our sins. Ya Allah, please make us punctual with our 5-time daily prayers, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, whatever lessons we learned today, Ya Allah, we ask you to make us take heed from them, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we ask you to make us dutiful to our parents, Ya Allah, and obedient to our parents. Ya Allah, we ask you to make us from amongst your closest of servants and slaves. Ya Allah, please grant us long, healthy and prosperous lives. Ya Allah, when the time of our death comes, Ya Allah, please grant us death in Iman. Ya Allah, when the time of our death comes, Ya Allah, please grant us death in the best of states. Ya Allah, whoever present from amongst the gathering is going through any type of difficulties, Ya Allah, please grant them ease. Ya Allah, whoever is in debt, Ya Allah, please make them debt free. Ya Allah, please bless all of our deceased family members, Ya Allah, please grant them complete forgiveness, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, please make their graves gardens from the gardens of paradise. اللهم إنا نسألك من خير ما سألك من نبيك وحبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ونعوذ بك من شر سعادتك من نبيك وحبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. أنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله.
We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant Mufti Sahib success in this life and continuously take work of da'wah from him. We all say Ameen. So please brothers, before you leave, have some food and also keep the masjid in mind. The donation buckets are there, so please donate generously. Sisters also downstairs, please don't leave without having some food. And also there is a donation bucket downstairs for the masjid. Barakallahu.